What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review, and this time we're taking a look at Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, written and directed by John Hughes, starring John Candy and Steve Martin. Trains, Planes, and Automobiles tells the story of Neil Page, who is a New York City businessman trying to make it home for Thanksgiving. During his travels, he meets a man named Del Griffith. They form a bond, and they work together to try and get Neil home for Thanksgiving. While all the while, they come into conflict with one another since they have very opposing personalities. Neil's a very uptight human being, while Del is more of a fun-loving type of guy. So yeah, that's the overall story of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about it. Overall, this movie is a comedy classic. Over 30 years later, this film still holds up. It is still a lot of fun to watch, especially around Thanksgiving time. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is one of those rare Thanksgiving movies that you don't get and that you don't really get. And what really makes this movie stand out is the dual performances of John Candy and Steve Martin as the characters of Del and Neil. These two are awesome in this movie. John Candy plays the character of Del as like this slobbish type of person, yet you can tell he has a heart of gold, and he just comes across as very, very lovable and very, very likable. While on the flip side, you have Steve Martin's character of Neil, who is just very uptight and can come across as very unlikable. But as the movie progresses, Neil's personality starts to change a little bit, and being around Del makes him a little bit more brings his guard down just a little bit, and he starts to become more likable, especially in the scenes when he and Del, have their bonding moments and a friendship forms between the two. And I like how it's not overly done with these two becoming friends. And I like how the movie gradually develops their relationship, and how it's very, very abrasive. And you can tell that Neil does not like the character of Del. But as the film goes on, you can see Neil, slowly starting to come around to Del, slowly starting to accept his personality, and just slowly starting to accept Del for who he is. And that to me is the strength and the backbone of this movie are John Candy and Steve Martin. If this movie did not have these two comedic geniuses in it, it would not have been as memorable or as good. Even though John Hughes is very talented at doing comedies, he's done movies like Home Alone, he's done movies like Uncle Buck and The Great Outdoors, and he's always had the right cast of actors in his movies. If he didn't have these two, even with John Hughes' talents, I don't think this movie would even come close to working. This movie would have been one of those comedies that you would have saw it once, got a few laughs out of it, and then you would have never remembered it again. But since it had comedic geniuses like Candy and Martin, that's the only reason why it stood the test of time for so long. This movie has got so many great comedic moments to it, so many great comedic beats to it. A lot of this film really still holds up. It's like the beginning of the movie when Neil's trying to hail a cab and he's in a foot race with Kevin Bacon. That scene's hilarious. The scenes of Neil and Del having their personality clashes in several scenes is absolutely phenomenal, and also has a lot of comedy. The scene where Neil curses out a woman at a car rental dealership after he gets stranded in the middle of nowhere. That scene is hilarious too. And just other scenes are just peppered through in, like them sharing hotels and them trying to go from like a plane to a train to an automobile, and something happens where they have to change, and something happens where they have to change their means of transportation. The plane can't land in Chicago because of the snowstorm. The train breaks down. Breaks down in the middle of nowhere. They get a rental car. They go down the wrong way by accident in a freeway, and the car just busts up in flames. Like anything bad that can go wrong does go wrong for these two characters, and it gets to the point where they just become immune to the nonsense that happens to them. And that's another thing. That's another thing that makes this movie so funny. This movie is just chock full of fun and just chock full of laughter. If there's any complaints I do have with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, there are certain elements of this movie that I thought that could have been expanded upon a little bit better. For example, the Kevin Bacon character, he's just there as a cameo, basically. I think it would have been much more interesting if Martin and Kevin Bacon were actually executives working for the same firm, and they had like a budding rivalry going on between the two. I think it would have made the foot chase scene a little bit more funnier. And this movie also has a cameo from Michael Mckean in one of his earlier comedic roles as a state trooper. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that because I like Michael. I just like Michael McKean, and I think his scene should have been expanded upon just a little bit more. And the whole thing with Neil's wife, she's just peppered in all throughout the movie for Neil just to make a couple of phone calls here and there too. But if you were to watch the rough cut of the film, how it was originally shot, there was actually an undergoing subplot where Neil's wife thinks she's having an affair. Thinks that Neil's having an affair, and the character of Dell is just a cover-up for Neil, which is what plays into the ending of this movie when where Dell and Neil's wife share a smile with one another. There's actually more to that. Instead, when you watch it in the movie, it comes across as just a little bit odd as to why they're beaming so brightly at one another. But if you were to actually insert the subplot that was originally supposed to be in this movie, kind of makes that whole thing make sense. Kind of makes you wonder, you could have at least kept it in. You could have trimmed it down a little bit. But yeah, you could have kept it in. And I don't think it would have hurt the movie, but I think it could have gotten a little bit more dramatic mileage out of it, while still maintaining the funny beats that this movie does overall have. However, I do understand it that you wanted to keep this movie as tight and fast-paced as possible, and it works. As the movie stands, it works. It's a hell of a lot of fun. It's really funny, and the ending is really well handled, and it's not overly sentimental or overly cheesy. We pretty much find out that through Neil, Dell has been a widowed man for the last 8 years, and he pretty much goes about his life almost aimlessly in a way. And Neil realizes this when he's on the train to finally get home, and that's where he invites Dell over to Thanksgiving after he realizes that Dell is pretty much a very lonely man and he shouldn't be alone on the holidays. And since these two have been through so much in the last 2 days, it's a nice little payoff between the two, and it further cements the newfound friendship between Dell and Neil. And Neil overall changes as a character, which is another reason why this movie's so great. So yeah, I can talk about this movie for quite a bit. It is a damn good and fun movie. At the end of the day, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles for me gets a solid 9 out of 10. This is a Thanksgiving classic. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.